The smell of old wood and gun oil lingered in the dimly lit pawn shop. Dust floated in the shafts of afternoon light cutting through the windows. Behind the counter, a young woman carefully ran a cloth along the long barrel of an aging sniper rifle. Her name was Emily Carter, just 22, and this job was all she had left after her father passed away last winter. He had been the one to run the store, the one who taught her that every old rifle carried a story, and that sometimes, if you listened closely enough, you could hear echoes of the people who once held it. Emily wasn't a soldier. She didn't know much about wars beyond what she read in books. To her, the M24 she was polishing was just another relic gathering dust on the back shelf until the doorbell chimed. A man in uniform stepped inside. His shoulders were broad, his posture rigid, the kind of stance that spoke of decades in service. His hair was graying at the temples, but his eyes were sharp. Colonel James Holloway, U.S. Army, retired. He paused halfway through the shop, frozen, his gaze locked on the rifle in Emily's hands. For a moment, Emily thought she'd done something wrong. "Where broken bar, where did you get at?" the colonel asked, his voice trembling in a way she hadn't expected. Emily blinked. It was tucked in a crate in the back. "My dad said a collector sold it to him years ago." "Why?" Holloway stepped closer, his eyes tracing every scratch, every faded marking etched into the steel. Then, just beneath the scope mount, his breath caught. A faint emblem, worn by time yet unmistakably the insignia of the Deadeye Division, a secretive sniper unit that had operated in the shadows of conflict zones decades earlier. "This rifle belonged to one of ours," he whispered, his throat tight. "The Deadeyes go the broken bar. I never thought I'd see it again." Emily tilted her head. "You knew the owner?" The colonel's hand hovered over the rifle, almost afraid to touch it. "I knew them all. And if this one's here broken bar, then it must have belonged to Sergeant Marcus Hale." His jaw clenched. "He saved my life in Kandahar. Took a bullet meant for me." "We never found his rifle." "Until now." Silence filled the shop, heavy with unspoken history. Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't expected an old piece of steel to carry such weight. Over the next hour, the colonel told her everything about the Deadeye Division, a unit of sharpshooters who operated where maps ended and silence was survival. About Marcus Hale, the quiet Texan who never boasted but always had his brother's backs. "He used to carve little notches under the stock," Holloway said, running a finger across the faint grooves Emily had assumed were scratches. "Not for kills." "No, a broken bar." Marcus marked every civilian life he managed to save. Emily's breath caught. "You mean a broken bar? This rifle saved lives?" Holloway nodded, his eyes misting. "Hundreds. He shot to protect, not destroy. This weapon, a broken bar, it isn't a relic of war. It's a symbol of mercy." For the first time, Emily looked at the rifle differently. It wasn't just wood and steel. It was a story, a sacrifice, a piece of someone's soul. The colonel asked if he could buy it, but Emily hesitated. Something inside her told her the rifle wasn't meant to gather dust on another shelf. It deserved more. That night, Emily sat at her father's old desk and thought long and hard. Her dad had always said their store wasn't just about selling antiques, it was about preserving history, about remembering the people who came before. The next morning, Emily made a decision. She met the colonel outside the Veterans Community Center, where retired soldiers gathered for support. In her hands, wrapped in a simple cloth, was the M24. "You should have it," she said, pressing the rifle into his arms before he could protest. "Not for yourself, for them. For everyone who needs to remember." Colonel Holloway's hands trembled as he accepted it. "Emily, a broken bar. This belongs in a museum, or a hall of honor. People should know what Marcus and the Deadeyes stood for." And that's exactly what they did. Within months, the rifle found a new home inside a small but powerful exhibit at the local war museum. Beneath the glass case, a plaque read, "The rifle of Sergeant Marcus Hale, Deadeye Division." Not marked by the lives it could but by the lives it saved. When the exhibit opened, veterans and civilians alike gathered. Some cried quietly, others stood straighter, remembering sacrifices long buried under time. Emily watched from the back, her chest swelling with something she hadn't felt since her father passed. A purpose. The colonel found her in the crowd, his eyes shining. "You gave people more than a rifle, Emily, you gave them hope. You reminded them that even in war, humanity can survive. She smiled softly. I think my dad would have liked that. As the years went on, schoolchildren on field trips would stop by the glass case. They'd press their little hands to the surface and read the words aloud. Teachers would tell the story of Sergeant Hale and his notches of mercy. And every time Emily visited, she'd see strangers walk away with something lighter in their hearts, a belief that kindness can echo through history, carried not just in words but in the choices we leave behind. The old M24 had been silent for decades, but now, it spoke louder than ever. Weeks after the rifle found its place in the museum, Emily returned on a quiet afternoon. The hall was nearly empty, save for a young boy in a wheelchair who sat staring at the display. His mother stood behind him, her hands resting gently on the chair's handles. The boy's eyes, wide with wonder, didn't move from the rifle. Emily overheard him whisper, "Mom, a broken bar, he saved people with that, not just soldiers, but families like us." His mother bent down. "That's what the sign says. Not all heroes carry swords, sweetheart. Some carry mercy." Emily's throat tightened. She walked closer, kneeling beside the boy. He did save people, and because of him, a lot of children grew up safe. He was brave, but more importantly a broken bar. He was kind. The boy looked at her as if she had just told him the most important secret in the world. Then he smiled. "I want to be like him." That small moment hit Emily harder than she expected. For the first time in years, she felt her father's words come alive. Every relic is a story. It's up to us to make sure it isn't forgotten. A month later, Colonel Holloway invited Emily to a gathering at the Veterans Center. She almost declined and nervous about intruding, but curiosity led her there. Inside, the room buzzed with laughter, stories, and the hum of coffee makers. Men and women with medals on their chests and scars on their hands sat around folding tables. Some had canes, some had wheelchairs, but all of them carried the weight of memories. When Holloway spotted Emily, he waved her over. "Folks," he announced, standing tall, "this is the young woman who gave us back a piece of Marcus." The room went quiet. Every eye turned to Emily. She felt her cheeks flush. Then, one by one, the veterans stood and offered words she never expected. "Thank you for remembering us. People forget what we gave." You reminded them. You gave our brother back his honor. Tears stung Emily's eyes. She had only given up an old rifle, but to them, it was so much more. Later that night, as she was leaving, Holloway stopped her at the door. His voice was lower now, softer. "You know, Emily, a broken bar, I never got the chance to thank Marcus's family. He had a little sister, just a girl, when he died. She grew up never knowing how much he gave. But now, because of you, she'll see his story told. We're arranging to bring her here." Emily froze. "His sister? She's still alive?" Holloway nodded. "She's in Texas. I spoke to her last week." She cried when I told her about the exhibit. Emily placed a hand over her mouth, overwhelmed. She hadn't realized her decision would ripple this far. 2 months later, Emily stood inside the museum once more. The event was small, intimate, but every seat was filled. Veterans, townsfolk, children, and reporters gathered to witness the unveiling of a new edition, a framed photograph of Sergeant Marcus Hale, smiling in his dusty fatigues, resting that very same M24 across his lap. Beside Emily stood a woman in her late 40s, Marcus's sister, Anna. Tears streamed down Anna's face as she reached out to touch the glass of her brother's photo. "I never thought people would remember him like this," Anna whispered, her voice shaking. "All these years, I thought he'd just be another forgotten soldier." Emily squeezed her hand. "He isn't forgotten. He saved lives. And now a broken bar, he's still saving them. Every child who walks through here will know who he was." Anna turned to her with eyes full of gratitude. "You gave me back my brother." That night, when the lights dimmed and the crowd left, Emily stood before the rifle one last time. The glass reflected her face back at her, but behind it, she saw something greater. The echo of sacrifice, the proof of humanity in the darkest times. For a moment, she whispered into the silence, "Thank you, Sergeant Hale." And though the rifle said nothing, Emily could almost feel the warmth of her father's hand on her shoulder, reminding her that history isn't just about the past, it's about the choices we make to honor it. Closing message. And so, what began as a young woman cleaning an old rifle in a dusty pawn shop became a legacy that spanned generations. A relic of war turned into a beacon of hope. A forgotten name carved its way back into memory. It showed the world that true strength isn't measured by the lives we take here but by the lives we choose to protect. Because sometimes, even the smallest act of selflessness can awaken a story powerful enough to inspire the future.